Hi, this is John Kenneth Press, reading Matthew Arnold's poem, Absence. Absence, there's the title. Absence, as you can see, is a short poem, so we're going to get through this all in one reading in this video. Absence is part of the Marguerite series. Marguerite is a woman he fell in love with, but sort of perhaps from a distance, at a Swiss resort 2 years running. And this poem goes out to her after they've parted. Hence, again, the title, Arnold feels Marguerite's absence. The poem begins. In this fair stranger's eyes of gray, thine eyes, my love, I see. And so this fair stranger is himself. It is Arnold, because Marguerite famously had blue eyes. So his eyes are the gray eyes. In his eyes, he sees Marguerite's eyes. My love, I see. It is quite beautiful. But it soon comes crashing downward. I read on. I shiver, for the passing day hath borne me far from thee. So when he sees her in his eyes, he shivers because she's been borne / taken away from him. It's not a good feeling, but an absence, to reference back to the poem's title again. And I love the language here. I love the fair stranger. That means that he does not recognize himself. He looks fair. He looks well. So he sees himself born anew, like a stranger, when he sees her eyes in his. But again, the shiver and the absence that has borne him far, far away from her. Moving on, I read. This is the curse of life, that not a nobler, calmer train of wiser thoughts and feelings blot our passions from our brain. So this is the curse, that our thoughts cannot or do not blot our passions from our brain. See, it speaks a nobler, calmer train of wiser thoughts, right? So it's talking about these thoughts. And again, these thoughts and their feelings, they're supposed to blot the passions from our brain, but they do not. So passions erupt, like, against our will. And this is very romantic. But then again, there's a dark underbelly. It's not really reassuring that our nobler, calmer thoughts cannot blot out passions, cannot control our brains that were sort of out of control. This next stanza is the darkest. And I'm going to interpret the hell out of it because it's also the densest. I mean, it's got so much. The word use is so amazing and stunning. So it's really worth really digging into. So for a coffin-related stanza, so we're going to dig into it. So here goes. But each day brings its petty dust, our soon-choked souls to fill. And we forget because we must, and not because we will. So again, not real optimistic since Marguerite's left. Since she's left, each day it brings what? What does each day bring? That's right, say it with me. Petty dust. So the days are just dust, which is again not optimistic. The next line, I believe, conveys that you've choked in dust after death. You've choked in dust after death. That's because we must ask, what will our soon-choked souls be choked by? Dust is the only thing that's been mentioned as something that could actually choke us. So ultimately, the thing that it must be referring to is we ultimately choke on the dust when we're dead, because we turn to dust when we're dead. There's a beautiful duality in the idea of a corpse turning to dust and being choked by dust at the same time, right? It's choked by the dust it's turned into. Real horror show stuff that is, right? Real horror show. And of course, where does a corpse turn to dust? In a coffin, right? So this corpse is turning to dust in the coffin. It's a beautiful little image. But what is, it's not even done yet, but what is, this is like 2 lines, right? But what is being choked? Our souls. Now here's dark humor, right? Your soul and your dust are made of different sorts of elements, you'd hope, right? The soul it's not even material, it's right? But dust can choke your soul. You thought wrong. You were dangerously wrong. This is dangerously dark. Again, in the coffin, turning to dust. And lest we forget, this is a comparison to having lost Marguerite. It's so over the top, so romantic. I love it. And next, we see the process of losing our memories. Yeah, even more cheery. This is another terrible and very specific part of death, kind of a part of death. And it happens to elders. And here's the worst part. Well, here, I'll read it again from the poem since we haven't heard it for a bit. And we forget because we must and not because we will. And this is brutal. It's a brutal form of explaining death. We lose our memories, not because we want to, not because we will it, but because we must, because time is erasing all our memories every day. Time is the ultimate eraser. It is brutal. There's no choice involved. Time is relentless, right? It just does this. And when it finally erases all our memories, we're gone. That's the ultimate in death. That is a pretty brutal, strong depiction of death. Wow, Arnold's packing that whole brutal meaning into 4 short lines leaves me dazzled. And we go deeper into the romantic horror show with the next stanza, too. Here goes. I struggle towards the light, and ye, once longed for, storms of love. If with the light ye cannot be, I bear that ye remove. Now, perhaps I'm stretching here, but let me ask you, when do you struggle towards the light, as in the first line? You do that when you're in the dark, right? And what place of darkness has been implied in this poem so far? Mr. and Mrs. Dust and Memory Loss? The darkness of the coffin has been implied in this poem so far. So this light and dark metaphor is a metaphor of life and death for me. And I know he could simply be struggling towards the light of Marguerite, but she's gone at this point in the poetry series. And the poem is called Absence, right? The absence of Marguerite. So uh, I don't know if he's struggling towards her. And in the next line, for further evidence, we read, if the light ye cannot be, if with the light ye cannot be, I bear that you remove. If with the light you cannot be, sounds like a description of death to me, if you can't be with the light. And she must then remove. Well, my interpretation ties it back into the previous stanza, this line, where before we saw that people were removed when they died via dust and memory loss, right? This is how you're removed ultimately. So if with the light you cannot be, I bear that you're dust or a fading memory, right? If you can't be alive, I bear that you remove these ways. Heavy, heavy stuff. And here's the last and final horror show stanza in Arnold's Absence. I struggle towards the light, but oh, while yet the night is chill, upon time's barren, stormy flow, stay with me, Marguerite, still. This is beautiful. Arnold himself struggles towards the light. This stanza's beginning almost exactly duplicates the prior stanza's opening, and so the emphasis again is on his struggling towards light, or life. But the night is chill. This sufficiently gives us the image of pneumonia, right? He's struggling towards life, but it's cold due to a chilly storm, so he may not succeed in getting into the light, and he may, rather than get to life, die in the storm. Ha, May. Well, what kind of storm is it? It's time's barren storm. This directly confirms time as the bringer of barrenness, i.e., the bringer of death. And as with memory and dust, that's what this poem's been about this whole time. Time equals death. And while he rides into death, he asks Marguerite, who's already gone from him and may be dead herself, he asks Marguerite to stay with him as he faces death in this storm. When you're asking memories of your life to help you make it in times of barren storm, you're nearly gone. It's over. Things are not good. Well, it's over for him, but not for us. The horror show has one more horror detail. When he says, stay with me, Marguerite, still, what does still mean? At first glance, it could refer to time, right? Stay, as in don't leave yet. But she's absent, right? And as in the title of the poem, she's already left, so that doesn't make any sense. But my gruesome interpretation of this last line, stay with me, Marguerite, still, puts together both her absence and his still wanting her to stay. I do this by extending the poem's main theme. He wants her to stay, and she's absent because she is there, and she's dead. So in what sense does he wish her to still stay? Well, using the poem's theme, he wishes her not to corrode into dust and in memory. And even as he is in death's throes, he's trying to keep her memory alive. That could make her present in her absent, right? Her memory could be alive. But that interpretation does not tie in the dust imagery from earlier. So, though it is morose, I have an interpretation that gets her absent and staying still, not only in memory, but from corroding into dust. Marguerite is there, but she's not just there as a memory, she's there as a corpse, an actual corpse. Arnold is saying, "Stay with me, Marguerite, still." As in, stay with me, though you are still. As though stiff, a stiff. Stay with me, as though your rigor mortis challenged. You get the idea, right? Stay with me, Marguerite, still. So her stillness is a reflection of her being dead. We'll call that the rigor mortis interpretation of absence. It explains the bulk of the evidence when he implies that he doesn't wish her memory to fade or her body to go to dust. This has been John Kenneth Press. Thanks for reading Matthew Arnold's horror show poem, Absence, with me.